So just to kind of go through what LD is a one versus one value-based debate. So what you're going to see here is both sides go through it. LD has a lot of a very set structure. So you'll have the affirmative come up and give a 6-minute affirmative speech, which will be their constructive speech. And that's going to be where they lay out their major contentions. The biggest difference between LD and public forum or some of the other debate events is that LD is going to focus on your framework, which is your value and your criterion. So essentially when we're looking at LD resolutions, they're set up to be in a way that there isn't one necessarily right answer, and we need to figure out how it is that we need to frame the round to figure out how it is that we can judge it, how you guys, as the judge, will be writing your ballots. And how they do that is through a value and a criterion. So their value might be something like justice. And justice is an abstract concept, so their criterion is going to show you how they get to achieve that value of justice. So when debating, they need to keep in mind their framework that's going to link to all of their contentions and all of their reasons why, but that's just something to kind of look out for in this debate. So you'll have your 6-minute constructive from the affirmative, and then you're going to have a 3-minute crossfire where the negative will ask questions to the affirmative. They can be clarifying questions, they can be questions that are going to try to poke holes in the other person's case. But then the negative will stand up and give a 7-minute speech, and the first part of that is going to be their constructive, so where they're laying out their framework and their contentions. And then the second part of that is going to be them going back and rebutting the affirmative case and talking about what the affirmative said and why that is either incorrect or why they outweigh. And then there'll be a 3-minute crossfire again where the affirmative is asking questions of the negative. So they'll then continue to go back and forth with the different speeches where the affirmative will give a rebuttal, the negative will then give a 6-minute rebuttal and summary, and then the affirmative will end the round with their final summary. So without further ado, I will let these two kick it off.
Is my judge ready? Is the audience ready? Okay, is my opponent ready? I strongly affirm the resolution resolved that the United States national service ought to be compulsory. I value life. Simply put, every human being on this earth has only one life to live. It is therefore essential to make sure that lives are not needlessly cut short. My value criterion is simply preserving life. Prefer my framework for 4 reasons. 1. Life is a prerequisite to literally any other value. Paul 81. Life is the ultimate value for each being because it is the precondition for the holding of all other values. Without life, no evaluation process is possible. Life being the ultimate good for each agent, he has the right to see those life-sustaining means which are requisite to exist. 2. Death is the worst harm. Patterson agreed. It is death per se that is really the objective evil because it ontologically destroys the current subject. It is the ultimate in metaphysical lightning strikes. Death is an evil because of the changing kind it brings about, a change that is destructive of the type of entity that we essentially are. 3. The right to life protects all other rights. This turns any argument centered on autonomy, as the dead have no rights. That's the only rights. The right to life is very often ranked higher than other rights. A major reason is that all other rights are contingent on this one, while the right to life is not contingent on the others. Dead people cannot exercise their rights. When the right to life is violated, all other rights are undermined. 4. Death is permanent. This again outweighs because almost all other harm can be compensated for or ended. Yet when someone dies, that's forever. The government can't bring people back from the dead. Contention 1. Peace is fleeting. We are currently living in the most peaceful era in all of human history. Peter Singer writes in the book Better Angels of Our Nature in 11. The central thesis of Better Angels is that our era is less violent and more peaceful than any previous period of human existence. The decline in violence works for violence in the family, between tribes, and between states. People living now are less likely to meet a violent death or to suffer from violence at the hands of others than people living in any previous century. Yet this unprecedented level of peace only exists because of American hegemony. Theo 7 elaborates. The fact that America is so powerful actually reduces the likelihood of major war. The presence of a dominant state in international targets actually reduces the likelihood of war because weaker states, including even great powers, know that it is unlikely that they could challenge the dominant state and win. This means that there will be no wars between great powers. But American hegemony is declining due to military overstretch, General 14. The greatest threat to the U.S. that is actually precipitating its decline is imperial overstretch. The historian Paul Kennedy defines imperial overstretch as the overextension either geographically, economically, or militarily that leads to the exhaustion of vital domestic resources, decline, and fall. The U.S. is overextending on military. There is a significant unsustainable overstretch of military personnel. The U.S. has lost one of a total of 737 military bases in 63 countries. The U.S. also suffers from personnel deficits. The 500,000 deployed recruitment is not sufficient. The military will simply drop from exhaustion as the U.S. tries to be everywhere all the time. Contention 2, affirming solves. America currently doesn't have enough troops to sustain its hegemony. National service will reinvigorate the military and reverse our decline. How is that $10? The military benefits of universal national service, larger and better educated armed forces would be compelling, given the variety of challenging and dangerous scenarios America might face in the future. Conscription will enable the force to affect the full spectrum of American life in terms of both classes and ethnic groups. Universal military service and will give much to promote mutual understanding among America's diverse groups with lasting benefits to national unity. And foreign adventurism is actually checked back by affirming, thus again saving lives, for Rule 13. Military service gives a Dutch bias to a country's foreign policy because the entire country bears the cost of military action. Everyone has a child or at least knows someone who is in the military. Those who have seen firsthand the cost of war all around instead of confined to a subculture. And empirics prove our current conscript army sees far more combat in South 17. The nation seems to send its all-volunteer military into conflicts more often. In the 27 years preceding the all-volunteer military, the U.S. engaged in 19 overseas military operations. Between 1973 and 2012, the military executed 144 operations. Contention 3. Affirming includes U.S. humanitarian efforts. U.S. armed forces engaged in worldwide humanitarian efforts, thus saving lives and rebuilding after disasters. Trend 13. U.S. aircraft carriers loaded with equipment, supplies, and thousands of troops have shown up early to some of the world's worst disasters over the past decade, including tsunamis in Japan and Indonesia and a deadly earthquake in Haiti. The ships are a symbol of U.S. power and charity. Disaster relief has become a key mission for the U.S. and a way to exercise the softer side of military influence overseas. U.S. humanitarian assistance often include Marines on the ground within hours of a funding, pick their supply routes and airports. The Blue Wall is limited to just allies. The aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson arrived in Haiti in 2010. The carrier brought 19 helicopters to deliver badly needed relief supplies. The Navy was also caught to action in December 2004, one of the worst tsunami disasters on record occurred following an earthquake in the Indian Ocean. The USS Abraham Lincoln was deployed off the coast of Indonesia. It crew carried food, water, and medical supplies to survivors. But these life-saving activities are only possible if the U.S. has enough troops abroad, which, as I've already shown, isn't happening in the next status quo. Therefore, an apt ballot is necessary to continue these humanitarian efforts and save as many lives as possible. Finish my speech and ready to begin cross-examination.
Okay, ready for cross-test? Ready? So let's start with your first contention. You talked about how the military is overstretched, correct? How is the U.S. military overstretched when it's the biggest army in the world?
Okay, so basically, like, we're deployed over a lot of the world. So basically, we don't have enough troops for a global reach of many different military bases.
And so what happens as a result of that?
Okay, so when we experience military overstretch, that causes decline and the collapse of American hegemony. And I showed you the 07 U.S. hegemony is keeping peace right now.
So we haven't had a draft in a very long time. Why hasn't America collapsed yet?
Okay, because basically imperial overstretch is something that has been happening gradually over the past few years and decades.
Okay, so then
now with Trump,
sure.
We just need to change it now.
So then when is it going to collapse?
Like, I can't give you a specific year or date, but it's happening gradually and we need to take action.
So then let's go on to your second contention. You talked about how providing military conscription is going to solve this issue. How is flooding the military with just like people that aren't necessarily trained going to solve this issue?
Like, I mean, to say they're not necessarily trained is ridiculous. Like, conscript armies in World War II and World War I like went into Europe and fought against Germany and they fought against Japan.
Okay, but
like most of our history, most of our wars were
so, but now we have a lot more different technology where you need to have way more training, right?
I mean, like, not necessarily, like, in this.
So there isn't more training necessary?
Like, I mean, we, like, train people and we can still train people in a few weeks and months.
Right, so
we have in previous wars and they can already do out and fight.
By requiring this conscription, would it be like over tripling our military, right? So how do we train all those people?
Okay, like, again, we train them like we have in previous wars, when we have previous examples of conscription, like World War II.
Sure.
That's nothing stopping us from.
So if let's say these people are less effective in the military, how is that going to solve the issue if there's like half the military that are ineffective, that don't know what to do?
So basically, the military is, it's a bureaucracy like any other. It's not like every single person drafted in the act world is going to go out and like fight on the front lines as an elite troop. We just need people to build the bureaucracy and man the military stations and bases worldwide. So that keeps
Right,
up
but if they're
against-
not trained, if they're like inadequately trained for that, how is that going to help the
They're
military?
not gonna be inadequately
Okay,
trained.
sure.
They will have training.
Okay, let's go on to your third contention. You talk about how the U.S. provides humanitarian aid. How is it going to be better able to do that just because we have more people?
Well, I mean, again, I show you with my Gen L-14 guard, like the U.S. military is overstretched right now, and because of that, we're losing our power, we're losing our hegemony. So if you have more people and you have more of a pool of talent, then you can
Right,
better
so-
basically control.
So if they're in the military, why would they be focusing their efforts in humanitarian aid?
Because like I show you with Trend 13, the military does that. They send aircraft carriers and Marines to clean up disaster sites. and
Okay,
save
so
lives.
if the U.S. economy is harmed, are they still going to be doing this?
I mean, I show you with my value, like life, that's the most important thing. That outweighs any amount of monetary impacts you could ever give me.
Okay. That's fine. I'm going to use running prep time.
Okay.
So make that. Okay, stop prep. 130 used. 230 remaining. So I'm gonna give my next speech and then the affirmative, a response to the affirmative. Is everyone ready? Resolved. In the United States, the national service ought to be compulsory. My value for this round is morality because it implies moral obligation. Morality speaks about what is right behavior and what is wrong behavior. My value criterion is maximizing happiness. Reasons to prefer. First, respect for human worth would justify util. Comiskey 90. By emphasizing solely the one who must bear the cost of free act, we fail to respect the many other persons who will bear the cost of our inaction. Persons have dignity that transcends any market value, and persons also have equality that dictates that some must give way for the sake of others. This means the ontology devolves into util. Even if they win their util index, their framework devolves to util anyway, so those index are non-unique. Second, util is best for practical decision making. It's the key to varied function of institutions, Bowden 9. Util is useful. Institutions are faced with many ethical decisions, often complex and difficult. Moral issues that arise are fundamental institutional function of our society, yet very few people have training in moral philosophy. They need a straightforward way of making these decisions. Virtue ethic or Kant do not necessarily give straightforward answers. A relatively straightforward way cut through fuzzy thinking would be util. Prefer state-specific justification because it's the after of the resolution. Contention 1 is econ. Conscription will do more harm to our economy than it is worth. Boudreaux and Wagner 07. Economists generally ascertain that the draft is an inferior means to raise an army. Different people are good at different tasks, implying that not everyone is equally good at being a soldier. By ignoring the principle of comparative advantage, the draft leads to an inefficient match between people and jobs, and thus output losses that can otherwise be avoided. The cost to society of drafting someone to be a soldier is the value of his or her loss protection elsewhere. These opportunity costs are substantial. For instance, the cost of the now abolished Belgium draft system amounted to twice its budgetary cost. Compulsory service is likely to lead to an inefficient organization within the military or the welfare sector. An army of inexperienced and poorly trained draftees is bound to suffer more casualties and inflict more human suffering than a professional army. The larger number of injuries or deaths could become financially more costly than a professional army. And military conscription kills the economy by taking people out of the workforce. Robinson 04. When a country conscripts soldiers, it artificially reduces the workforce in society. This artificial reduction in the supply of labor increases the price of labor and in turn reduces the quantity demanded, thus reducing the overall number of goods and services a society produces. This causes a lower standard of living. And economic collapse causes global wars. Royal 10. Rhythms in the global economy are associated with the rise and fall of power and the often bloody transition. Exogenous shocks such as economic crisis could usher in a redistribution of relative power. If the expectation of future trade decline, particularly for difficult to replace items such as energy resources, the likelihood for conflict increases, as states will be inclined to use force to gain access to those resources. The linkage between internal and external conflict and prosperity are strong and mutually reinforcing. Economic conflict lends to spawn internal conflict, which in turn returns the favor. Economic decline has been linked with an increase in the likelihood of terrorism, which has the capacity to spill across borders and lead to external tensions. Contention 2 is crime. Argentina shows that military conscription in the U.S. would likely increase crime rates. Giuliani et al. 06. Conscription is likely to increase crime rates. We can consistently find a reduction in crime rates on those ID numbers that were not made eligible for the military service. The effect of conscription on crime was also larger than those that the military service in the Navy, which served for 2 years instead of 1. Participating in the military service increased the likelihood of developing a criminal record. Perhaps the firearm training received during military service reduced the entry costs into crime or the natural barriers to committing violent acts. It may also be the case that military service delayed the insertion of the young into the labor market, affecting future opportunities. Now, going on to my opponent's case. For my opponent's framework, we basically have the same framework. It's a utilitarian framework. We're just trying to create the better world, and we're just trying to see which side does that better. Now, going on to the first contention, my opponent's first contention is that currently the world is peaceful and that U.S. hegemony is the cause of this. That's not something I disagree with. However, next my opponent says that military outstretch is a problem. However, military is ready now without a draft. Phase 14. I'm not sure to add a lot from a standpoint of quality of the service, said retired U.S. Marine Corps 4-star General James Cartwright. The ability of the current force to do everything that we've asked it to do so far has been demonstrated to be the best in the world. So military overstretch is not an actual problem. Furthermore, conscription decreases national security and weakens the military by killing morale, increasing turnover rates, and decreasing quality of work. And now 12. The ABF has been brilliant. Quality is far better than under a draft. A voluntary military can be choosy and set high standards. The end of the draft has improved commitment and morale. The difference is simple. Recruits who want to serve and succeed are likely to perform better than draftees who want out. The ABF also enjoys higher re-enlistment rates, which would reduce turnover and enhance experience. Shifting to conscription would significantly weaken the military. The military would be less bright, less well-educated, and less positively motivated. So even if there's more people in the army, that doesn't necessarily make it a better army, right? Just because you have more people does not mean it's better. Now, going on to the second contention, my opponent says the affirmative solves. However, you can cross-apply Bandow 12 here, right? Just because you have a bigger army does not mean they're going to be a better army. They're going to be less efficient as an army, so it doesn't matter if they have more people. It's going to be more detrimental to their hegemony if their military is inefficient and ineffective. Going on, you can also look at the econ evidence that I provided, right? If the economy is going to be collapsing in the affirmative world, the U.S. hegemony also dies along with the economy. If their economy is not at the high point it is right now, their U.S. hegemony across the world dies. So going on, my opponent said conscription is going to create national unity. However, conscription does not lead to a more representative military. With Provera and Wegner 09, there's hardly any reason to believe that conscription makes the military representative. Even as peak conscription covers substantially less than 50% of the population, the military draft is biased. Analysis of Vietnam-era veterans indicates that individuals of high socioeconomic status were widely unrepresented. In Germany, males with higher educational status are more likely to be called to service. In the Philippines, military training is compulsory for male college and university students. By contrast, 24 out of 95 countries with military draft have shorter terms for college students, 11 of them with a complete exemption. Legal and illegal buyout options favor wealthy, urban, and well-educated citizens. So it's not going to bring everyone together, right? Because wealthy and people with high socioeconomic status are still able to avoid the draft, which means that there's not going to be less military action taken by the U.S., right? Because these people who are making the decision to take military actions are not going to be a part of the draft. They'll be able to avoid the draft because they're in that position to make these calls, right? On the third contention, my opponent talks about humanitarian efforts, how it's going to increase as a result of the rising U.S. hegemony. However, that's not going to be happening, right? If the economy is going to be collapsing, the U.S. is going to focus on their selves, right? They're going to be focusing on their own economy rather than trying to help out other nations. So the humanitarian efforts are actually going to be going down. Furthermore, the economic collapse also causes death within the United States. So once again, this is another reason that the U.S. is going to focus on the United States rather than the other countries. And you can also look to my second contention when we talk about crime. If there's a bunch of crime rate increase in the United States, once again, rather than focusing on humanitarian efforts on other countries, the United States is going to focus on themselves.
Ready for questions? Is my judge ready? Is the audience ready? Is my opponent ready? Okay, so you spend a lot of your time talking about the economy, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so like, would you say that's one of the largest impacts in the land?
Well, economy is not really the impact. The economy is a link to the impact.
All right, so like, why exactly should we value things like a better economy above human life and
Right,
human
so you can
existence?
look, the economy in my case is the link to the global wars efforts, right? That's the impact. The impact of a decreasing economy is global war, and that causes death. So I think you would agree that's a bad thing.
Okay, so you say in Royal 10 that basically like there's a redistribution of power when we have an economic collapse.
Sure.
Like, okay, so when in your previous cards do you show that there will be an economic collapse?
Right,
Like, you
so
talk
if the
about,
economy is constantly
or standard of labor or whatnot, but when you link that,
Sure. So if the economy is constantly declining, it's going to collapse. Like you said, if the American hegemony is constantly declining, it's going to collapse, right? It's the same thing here.
okay, but you actually have a line in that card that says like this will cause a depression, this will destroy our economy.
It
or
says
will
it's
just
going to
make
harm our
it worse.
economy. Yeah.
All right. So on Janelle 14, you say that like we have like the ability of forces right now.
On your evidence?
Yeah, you said with
Yeah.
like Vasquez 14.
Yeah.
Okay, but like ultimately, like don't I still show you that our military is overstretched? Like we're not talking about combat performance. We're talking about basically protecting the world and having.
Right. So if my evidence is saying that the military has been able to do everything it's been asked to do so far, that doesn't mean like it means we don't need more people, right?
Right.
If it's able to do all of its responsibilities.
Okay, so on your second connection about crime, this Giuliani Olsis card, this is talking about Argentina, correct?
Sure.
Okay, does it give any level of, does it give any like explanation of causality?
Yeah,
like,
so it
this
talks
causing
about
the
how
other thing?
So it talks about how it could lower the entry to crime, right? Because you're already committing violent acts. When you're in the military, you're basically forced to commit violent acts, right? When you shoot a gun, you also learn how to shoot a gun, so that also lowers the barrier of entry to crime. And also, you take out 2 years or 1 year of your life, which destroys like future opportunities for yourself. So you have like something you can look to is crime.
Okay, so like how can you say that military training makes people able to like perform crimes and they learn how to shoot a gun, but then on another card you say that it's ineffective and people aren't actually experienced enough to be soldiers?
Right, so you
How does that
like
work?
learning how to shoot a gun is a lot different than being a part of the military, right? You can simply learn how to shoot a gun, but it takes a lot more effort to work as a unit in the military.
Okay, and like you say a lot with your first connection about like opportunity costs being
Yeah.
lost and whatnot. Like you realize that the military does not only have frontline troops while like shooting at
Sure,
other
but if
countries,
you're
they have all
trained,
kinds of
yeah,
forces.
if you're trained as like a biologist or physicist, you're not going to do that well. Like your opportunity is not going to be as well spent in the military, right? You're trained for something else.
Can we just like mold people, like put them in certain positions based off of like a questionnaire or their experiences in high school and whatnot?
Okay,
and
so
ask them?
like if you're trained as a physicist, what job would you be in the military?
I mean, like you could be
like, there
any
is a
number of
job.
things. You could be like an organizer or someone working with logistics or whatnot. Like why not? I'll just be taking one in prep starting now. remaining. Go ahead.
Yep.
Is my judge ready? Is the audience ready? Is my opponent ready? Now it'll just be NCAC for people to. A corpse cannot experience any happiness. That's all you need to affirm in this ground. On the value of morality, two responses. One, morality is too vague. You can only actually weigh, understand, and apply life. So you can only actually get to that. Whereas morality is too vague to understand. You default to the most specific framework. Second, life is a prerequisite to morality. I show you with quality one that we can only have morality or any other value if we're first living. On its value criterion of utilitarianism, two responses. One, utility is not more. If I have five sadists torture one innocent child, that might generate net pleasure, but it obviously wouldn't be more. And second, even if you do buy utility, you can still turn it on saving millions of lives, and that clearly outweighs any harms that he can give you in his case. So I oppose his when better on his first justification of human worship is wrong. Something like the Roman Colosseum would be seen as good, or letting people die or watching people be slaughtered. If it brings happiness just as long as it's a net pleasure and an overall positive amount. And to a second point on institutions, we can turn this as well. All people value life, so that's much easier to understand than morality or utilitarianism. I hold that better on its first connection about the economy. Life impacts are always going to our way. I give you 4 reasons why in my framework we need to preserve life first and foremost. That always having things like money or supplies or GDP or whatnot. He says that the draft is bad, it's way down to 7 evidence, but the military is a bureaucracy like any other. You can just fit people into different positions and adapt them to it. He says an inexperienced army is worse, but again, we need better bases and just more troops over basically all around the world. Basically, you don't need them to, you need to be sending them all into combat and we'll be having less rotation of jury with those. He says that the Robinson on the floor that we have a low supply of labor and whatnot, but again, war's turn that causes even more economic harm. He says there's a worse standard of living, but he doesn't show it's widespread. He just says it harms the economy, and it's really opaque how he doesn't give you any link to economic harm. He just says it'll happen, but the best evidence he gives you is just that it will harm the economy, not that it will cause harm. On second mention out front, one, there's no causation in his study. Two, Argentina is not unique. It doesn't even count. It's not the United States. And three, again, on our way, stopping massive wars, saving humanitarian efforts, and whatnot, onto my case. So he says my framework is utilitarian, but it's not. It's about preserving life, not maximizing happiness. So you're extending all 4 of my framework justifications. One, life is a prerequisite to any other value, quality. 1, 2, get to the on Patterson, or 3, destroys the human subject. 3, it protects all of the rights. That's axiom. And 4, death is permanent. You extend all 4 of these across the board. This will be a huge impact going into the 2AR. So on my first connection to Janelle 14, he says that this general affirms all of the ability of our forces. But again, we're talking about keeping the peace. He's talking about combat. These are 2 entirely separate things. And he also brings up ban as well with better quality of volunteer basically drafted troops storm the beaches of VA, defeated Nazi Germany. You can't say they're not effective. And again, my General 14 evidence specifically tells you we need more troops. That's the #1 problem we're facing right now, and I solve for it. Now, on the second connection, he says that economic collapse destroys the Germany. Again, he doesn't give you anything. He just says it might harm the economy. That's not the same thing as causing a depression. And you're extending Joey 13 and Todd 17. Joey tells you that we'll have fewer conflicts and fewer military examples of interventionism and whatnot when we have a drafted military, because everyone has something to lose. And South 17 backs it up empirically. We had almost 5 times more foreign military operations overseas with a all-volunteer army than we did with a conscripted army. So you're going to see far more wars and far more death if you negate. Under the third conjuncture humanitarian efforts, he says because humanitarian again, wars are going to do that far more. He says economic collapse brings economic nationalism, and there's death on economic collapse. Again, he doesn't give you any actual link to economic collapse. The best evidence he has is just that basically having conscription is going to harm the economy, but it doesn't give you any evidence that it will cause a collapse or widespread problems. His evidence doesn't back up what he's saying. It doesn't match with his taglines. It's a clear valid in this round.
I have 230 remaining, using the rest of that, starting now. I'll be going over the negative, the affirmative, negative voting issues. Is everyone ready?
Yeah.
So starting off with the negative on framework, I already agreed with my opponent's framework for this round, right? So there's no point in arguing on framework. We're just going to see who saves the most amount of lives and which side actually does that, right? So going on to my first contention, my opponent says that life outweighs this impact. However, my impact was life, right? Because the economy collapses, that's going to cause global wars. That's going to lead to a decrease in the amount of lives and people are going to be dying, right? So in this contention, life was the impact, so life can't outweigh life. So going on, my opponent says there's multiple different positions, so the argument about opportunity cost does not apply. However, my opponent is misunderstanding what this argument is, right? If a person is trained as a physicist, spends like 10 years to become a physicist and has a PhD in physics, right? They're not going to be as efficient in the military, even if they're given a job as an organizer, right? They're still not able to use the applied knowledge that they learned. They're not able to apply the knowledge that they learned as a physicist, right? So that opportunity cost, the production output loss, is going to harm the United States. It's going to harm the United States economy and lead to a decline that eventually leads to a collapse, right? Going on, my opponent keeps saying that we need more troops, and by having more troops, we're going to solve this issue. However, once again, this opportunity cost does not really have anything to do with the amount of troops in the army, right? This opportunity cost is talking about if we put people who are trained at certain jobs, such as a physicist, and put them in the military, where they're not able to use the knowledge that they have learned, it's not going to lead to the maximum output. So now going on, my opponent talks about how that, when I talk about how it's going to take out the labor force, my opponent says it's actually going to be beneficial to the economy somehow. However, once again, my opponent doesn't actually address what this card is saying, right? This piece of evidence is talking about how if we take out 2 million people from the labor pool like every year, consistently, right? That's going to lead to an decrease in the supply of labor, which is going to cause an increase in the price of labor, right? So companies are going to be less likely to actually hire people because it costs more to hire people. What that means is there's going to be a decrease in the total production and goods and services provided by these companies because they have less employees, right? That's going to lead to an economic collapse, right? It's a constantly declining economy, which eventually does provide an economic collapse, right? My piece of evidence do say it's going to harm the economy, and if you keep toppling over this economic hegemon we have as the United States, it's going to eventually collapse, right? And what that means is going to cause global wars. That was the Royal Time and evidence we talked about. If there's an economic collapse, it's going to cause these global wars because of reasons such as like this. The diversionary theory talks about how if people are going to be more likely to actually cause these wars in order to create like a rally around the flag effect, right? So going on to the second contention, my opponent says it's not the United States, so it doesn't really matter, and that lives are going to outweigh. However, first of all, just because it's not the United States, it doesn't really matter. It still applies, right? It gives specific reasons as to why why there was an increase in crime. That can still apply to the U.S., right? If people are taken out of their job experience for 1 or 2 years, right, they're going to lose they're going to lose out on future opportunities, and that's going to lead them to crime because that's like an option that they have. And also, it's going to lower the barriers of entry to crime because they learn how to kill, they learn how to use these guns, right? That's going to decrease the entry to. They're going to lower the entry to crime. And going on, even if my opponent says the lives are the most important, right? The crime can lead to loss of lives, right? There's murders, right, that actually lead to loss of lives. So crime does also lead to loss of lives. You can't just ignore crime. Going on to my opponent's case then. On my opponent's first contention, my opponent once again brings military outstretched, keeps talking about how we need more troops. However, like I said, just because you have more troops does not necessarily make it better, right? You can look at the Bandel 12 evidence, which talks about how it's going to actually lead to a more inefficient military, which talks about how because there's these people that are being flooded into the military that don't necessarily want to be in the military, they're not going to put out their best effort. That's going to basically cause the military as a whole to be less efficient or be inefficient. They're not going to be able to do their jobs as well as they are today, which is going to be harming U.S. hegemony. Right? Furthermore, you can look at the FACE 14 evidence, which talks about how we are able to do everything that we're asked to do with the amount of people right now, right? Even if these people are stretched out, that doesn't really matter because they still are able to do their response. They're still able to fulfill their obligations, right? Going on to the second contention, my opponent says absolves. Once again, you can look at the Bandel 12 evidence, which talks about how it's going to be harming the military, the efficiency of the military. So it's going to kill U.S. hegemony. So you can turn this argument on. And another reason my opponent didn't really talk about that kills the U.S. hegemony is going to be the economy, right? As the economy in the United States is going to be collapsing, and the United States economy collapses, they're not going to be at a global hegemon if they have no economy, right? So that's going to kill U.S. hedge as well. Going on, my opponent talks about how we're going to lead to fewer conflicts. However, once again, this is just not true, right? You can look at Provera, evidence I provided that talked about how people who are in high socioeconomic power are able to avoid the draft, so they're not even in the draft, they're not even talking about, like, they're not going to be experiencing the same things as the other people, which means these people who are making the decision to go into war are not going to have that experience that my opponent talked about, right? So these people, it's going to have basically no effect on how much, like, how likely we are to go into war. So on the third contention, once again, you can look at the fact that if we have harm in the economy, what's going to happen is that the U.S. is not going to send that humanitarian aid, right? We're going to be focusing on the United States. Same thing with crime. If there's a bunch of crime increase in the United States, we're going to lead to less humanitarian aid overseas, and we're going to focus on the United States now. Now, voting issues. So the framework we're going to use is the looking to preserving life, right? Just because it's my opponent's framework does not mean my opponent wins this round, right? It's just a lens that we view this round with. Our first reason you're going to vote for me is because of the economy. The economy, the act kills the economy in two ways. First is opportunity cost, and the second is destroying the labor force, right? Both these reasons cause a collapse in the economy. It's going to decline the economy so badly that eventually does lead to collapse, which causes these global wars that kills millions of people. That's going to not preserve life. That's what the act is doing. Vote nay. The second reason you can vote for me is because of hegemony. Even though this is my opponent's argument, the opponent is actually killing this hegemony, right? The first piece of evidence that talked about that was how the United States is actually going to be less efficient as an army, as a military, because there's going to be a flood of people who don't want to be in the military. That's going to kill U.S. head. That's going to cause more wars. Second reason it's going to kill U.S. head is because of the economy. When the U.S. Economy collapses, it's going to kill U.S. head, and that's going to cause more wars, not preserving life, and that's what the act is doing. Vote nay.
I have 1 minute, 55 seconds remaining. I'll just be taking that starting. Voting issues. Is my judge ready? File names ready? Is my phone ready? The first voter is going to be on framework. My opponent keeps saying we're running the same framework, but that's absolutely false. His is maximizing happiness with morality. Mine is life and preserving life. They're entirely different. So you're extending all four of my framework justifications. He doesn't touch them in either of his speeches. So first, call anyone because you can't have any evaluation process if you don't have life first. So life is always going to be the first and foremost thing to protect. Second, parasonically because death is the worst harm. It destroys the human subject, so you need to prevent that first. Third, NCOA tells you all other rights depend on life. So again, it's the most important thing. And fourth, death is permanent. Again, it's the worst harm. You need to go for the side that best prevents death and preserves life. And that's clearly a permanent side. And his value criterion of you two. I've already done this, and he just drops this completely in the 2.5 with saving millions of lives with an app ballot, and he never addresses this. So on either framework, even if you support utilitarianism, then you're still going to be voting affirmative. And he says that he turns it, he saves more lives, but I'll show you why that's false.
pause in just a sec. On the second photo, world peace, basically Janelle 14 talking about basically our declining hegemony tells you that the biggest problem we're facing right now is personnel overstretch. The 500,000 deployed recruitment is not sufficient right now. That's why our military, that's why our country is declining right now. That's the number one problem we need to solve in order to preserve the hegemony. When you talk to the grassroots work, when you talk about the ability of forces and whatnot, that's talking about going out and facing power. That's not talking about generally being deployed around the world, to preserve the peace. He's talking about something entirely different with this and his banned out 12 dollars. Now, moving on from there. So Dopey and part of both of these extend. He addresses the second one in his criminal, but that's breaking the rules. You need to drop him for this, or at least drop his argument. He can address it in the second negative speech. So Dopey 13 tells you there's less adventurism when everyone has a relative or friend in the military, so there will be less foreign adventurism and conflicts and whatnot. And South 17 backs up in Field 3. We have almost 5 times more military interventions and conflicts with our current volunteer army than we did with the conscripted army. So that's clearly winning me any points about wars when we engage in war almost 5 times more often with the volunteer army than with draftees. Clearly, if you want to support, it's not valid. And he keeps talking about his economy, because how that destroys hegemony and causes death, but there's no link. He just uses evidence that says it will harm the economy, but that's not the same thing as causing a depression and economic crisis. He doesn't have any link in this round. And again, he caused by his crime, he says that will cause more deaths, but again, that's not applicable. It's an entirely different country, so you cannot apply it to the United States. They're just not comparable. And the third voter is my third tension, talk about humanitarian efforts. This just saves tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands more lives onto the millions who are already saving by preventing wars and preserving the peace we have right now. So again, he's just saving even more lives, and his responses, he just crossline his economic and his crime impacts and whatnot. But again, I've already addressed these. Now I don't have links to the United States and our status quo. In a round where only the act is preserving life, you'd have to be suicidal to even consider voting nay.
Okay, awesome. So if you guys need to be dismissed to get changed or anything like that, you're welcome to. I'm just gonna kind of go through a few things I'll come up there. For everybody, as far as just generally how to judge the round, and then go through some more specific feedback. All right, so I guess starting off, I know a lot of people here were throwing, but I just want to go over that really quickly. When you're trying to make the decision as the judge, obviously there's a lot of arguments that are going back and forth, and the way that you keep track of that, or as competitors, the way that you keep track of what it is that you need to be talking about is through flowing. So what I typically do is have a color assigned to each of the debaters. So for me, app is traditionally blue, neg is traditionally red. You can be creative with it. And I keep one flow where all of the app cases and one flow where all of the neg cases. Just so I'm able to align my arguments. What you can see from this flow is clearly that we're good at going back and forth between the points, because you can see there was a response, there was an argument made, a response from the affirmative, an argument then made back from the negative. On rounds where you end up having basically arguments dropped, there would be nothing there, and that should highlight to you as a judge that, hey, the affirmative made a point, the negative didn't say anything to combat it. So that just flows through the end of the round. And for me as a judge then, that argument I assume is true because the negative didn't say anything to combat that. For cross-examination, so this is again kind of up to you as the judge as to how you want to make these notes. I don't flow anything that's said in cross-ex. They have to bring it up in a speech in order for them to be able to use that point. And I would say, in this round in particular, there were a few really critical things that were said in cross-ex that weren't brought up as strongly in those following speeches, which I think may have been able to help both of them out. But again, if it's not being said in the speech, even if it's something that I'm like, ooh, this is a good idea and a good track, it's not something that I'm going to actually write down on my flow. I might make a note of it just to kind of highlight it for myself later on or put in my feedback. But that's something as judges, you can kind of figure out where you want to put that so that you're able to remember those, but it doesn't necessarily impact that flow of the round. So then one of the other things that just to highlight is when we talk about the link versus the impact, at the end of the day, in all debates, we're looking at where does the impact come from? What is it that we're going to see is what we're voting off of in the round, what's happening based on the affirmative world or the negative world. In LD, because you have that framework, that makes it really clear to figure out where it is that we should be looking to. So this round boiled down to looking at basically maximizing life, who's going to save the most lives. And so that should make it really clear for you as a judge, hopefully if they're doing their job right, because they're able to give you exactly what you should be voting off of, like give you the criteria for you to figure out where your ballot is. You can see there were two different things that happened in this round, and both of them are okay, where you can either completely combat the other framework and talk about why we need to outweigh that framework with the one that you're providing, or you can say, listen, like I agree with that framework, but let me show you how I uphold it better. So both of those things are okay, and then you as the judge need to figure out if we've decided that we're just agreeing on one framework, then that makes things a little bit simpler. If we are going back and forth and trying to outweigh what's better, utilitarianism or maximizing lives, then that puts a little bit more on you as the judge then to discern like how exactly we should be addressing this. So another thing I want to just point out there for judges is making sure that you are not using prior knowledge when you're in this round. So obviously we all come in with background knowledge, and some topics you're going to know much better than other topics. Regardless of how much you know or don't know, you really have to go based off of what's happening in this round right here. So for instance, I know like in this round if you talk about like is the military just front lines, could somebody with a physicist degree still be used in the military? Yes. But without having like those specific, like unless it's brought up specifically in that round and they're giving you evidence or some sort of analytics, you as the judge need to keep that knowledge to the side. And again, while it could be used in your feedback for just like, hey, alternative things for you to research, it can affect how you're judging the round. Because the only thing, basically like, you can't do any of the work for the debaters, they have to do all the work up here. So when we are really looking at determining this round, and I'm going to try to make this quickly, just knowing that we have other rounds that are about to start. Really, I use the framework to figure out how to judge this round. So at the end of the day, when looking through my flows, who is preserving the most lives? Like who is saving the most amount of lives? And you'll see that these guys actually made it much easier. And again, like you can tell more experienced debaters by giving you voting issues. So really, when we boil this down, we would look at if we're looking at the economy and if we're looking at U.S. hegemony, where are we able to see like where are those lives either saved or lost? And so at the end of this round, really what I was looking at is if we were able to look at maximizing the economy with like, or if we were looking at having opportunity cost lessen the economy, that would be something that might impact when we're looking at that final impact of global wars. I agree that wouldn't have been an impact in and of itself that would outweigh life, but when we're looking at ultimately that global war would end up losing U.S. hegemony and end up losing lives, then that would be one of the issues that I'd be voting off of.